Hello you lovely lot and welcome to a new video. My name is Katie and today we're going to take a little old look at the Hobbycraft Gouache set. I was hoping to have something a little more festive, but if you're a bit of a regular on this channel, you know I have been incredibly flued up. I'm pleased to say I'm feeling a lot better now, and I just want to say a massive thank you to all of you who sent well wishes my way. Oh, flu's horrible, isn't it? But anyway, shall we talk about these paints? So these are the Hobbycraft Gouache 12 paint set. Hobbycraft is a UK store, I'm not sponsored or anything by the way, and they do stock some other brands, but they also have a line of their own stuff, and I thought these intrigued me enough to give them a try. They cost £8, you get 12 tubes, and they contain 12 millilitres per tube. Well, there's the basic information. Let's talk about the colours we've got. So we have a lemon yellow, yellow ochre, scarlet, crimson red, cobalt blue, viridian, sap green, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, burnt umber, lamp black and a titanium white. Now you will have to excuse the swatches, I got the burnt umber and ultramarine mixed up just down to the pure excitement of it all. And because I'm a little bit dozy sometimes, never mind, but you know what I mean. Let's face it, we just want to look at the colours, and them swatches are for my reference really. Now you'll notice that I am painting them on the page opposite to the Holbein Gouache set, and well, yes, there is a considerable price difference. The Holbein cost a little bit more, but there was no deliberate reason. It was just a blank page I'd got in the book, and you can tell straight away that the Hobbycraft ones aren't quite as vibrant. But that's okay, they only cost £8. However, they were not quite so pleasant to paint with. Upon swatching, I noticed that they really did take some working around the little squares I'd done just to get that pigment moving. And they didn't quite have as much vibrancy, which, okay, I understand that. Also, obviously, I just dot the tube onto the page and then swish it around with a wet brush afterwards, so it's a little bit hard to determine what the sweet spot is for that water ratio that I love going on about. But one of the things that did concern me was that titanium white. It is not very white and it is not very opaque, but let's see if I can use these supplies to create something that's at least semi-decent. And as I determined on the last gouache video with the Royal and Langnickel paints, the price doesn't necessarily mean it's going to determine the quality. The Royal and Langnickel ones were really cheap, but they were really good to work with, so I wanted to see if that same principle would be passed on to the Hobbycraft ones, or at least be able to use them. As you can see on screen right now, I thought I'd just, show you guys what it's like mixing with these. I usually add just a couple of drops of water to a splodge of the paint and work from there to find that sweet spot. However, you can see it takes absolutely ages to get these paints to mix in the first place. I really did feel like I was having to mash the brush in there just to get it to accept that water. I'm not entirely sure if this has a lot of, filler in there because, yeah, okay, there's a pigment going on there, but the interaction of pigments when I was mixing them, it didn't seem like I was getting very far with it. And another point was, again, referring to that sweet spot of water to paint ratio. I found it was really difficult to determine what would be best to work with. If I had it so it flowed nicely off the brush and I could have what I would determine as nice even strokes, that would be great, but then I lost a lot of the pigments there as well as any opacity really. On the other hand, if I wanted those bold colours to come through, well, as bold as we could get, as well as that opacity, then obviously and naturally a thicker mixture would be the key, right? But there was no happy medium when I tried to create a slightly thicker mix, just so I'd got those colours there. It made it really difficult to paint, and I can only compare it, not that I've actually tried this as a medium before, but I can only compare it as trying to paint with toothpaste. And I also use the word paint very loosely there because It felt more like I was trying to smear this thick paint on just so I'd got a decent amount of colour to work with. For the background, and I've gone for a slight satin kind of theme here. It's not exactly satin, but you'll get where I'm coming from as this picture progresses. But for the background, I wanted to try and do a bit of a gradient, and it's not a massive speciality of mine, but I like to think I can at least try and get a semi-decent one, and it just wasn't happening. And you can see, especially where those purples and blues merge, it was so patchy and horrible. Actually, now that I'm looking at it, the green and blue doesn't look great either. I really disliked how on these larger areas, how patchy it was. I mean, I like to use gouache quite thickly, as I'm sure if you've watched this channel for a while now, that's just how I like to run with it. It's not like using a watercolour where you'd have to build those layers up, and obviously you're relying on a transparency there. I like to use it thick and I like to use it opaque, and it just didn't really let me do much of either, to be honest. Not without at least really working into it. I decided the background probably couldn't be salvaged from what I'd done. Normally I'd go over it in another coat because, yeah, I do understand some gouaches can vary on the transparent side. I've mentioned before, especially with certain pigments that have the blues in them, they're not super opaque. A touch of white paint usually remedies that, but I just couldn't risk giving this another layer because I just had a horrible feeling that it would reactivate so easily, and because it goes down kind of transparent in the first place, it's just going to highlight as well all of those ugly marks underneath. So I was at a bit of a quandary as to where to take it. For the dragon itself, I thought let's give these paints another chance and see if I can do a better gradient on a smaller surface area, and I was happy to say it was a little bit better, but again though, those issues of it just not being very even, very difficult to find the right consistency to paint with as well. Obviously I'm having to hone in on the details here and make slightly finer brush strokes to what's in the background there, but again it was really hard. It was so hard. But I do find that although there were all those flaws there, I do find that the smaller detailed areas, at least I could get a better gradient. But I'm still not super happy with it. But don't worry, because as always, I like to add a bit of texture on there, and that does sort of help to detract the eye from those areas where I'm not too happy with. So I guess I'm going to talk about what it was like to do more finer details with a smaller brush. Oh, and the brushes, by the way, I think are definitely the artful ones. I love painting with those. I think some of the cheap, fine detailing brushes, which you can pick up a pack of 12 for about maybe a tenner, I'd definitely shop around though. They're pretty much all the same. And possibly a Royal and Langnickel, I'd be honest, I can't remember. Oh, and of course the paper is the Frisk watercolour paper as well. Again, not sponsored, but I do quite like the stuff. It's a nice surface for gouache. But anyway, waffling aside, yeah, so obviously I'm onto the dragon's limbs now, and again, it was so hard. I wanted that thick colour on there, but again, it kind of compromised how much detail I could get down there. And as you can see, I'd got it to the consistency where I thought I could at least retain some of that pigment, but it still went on quite patchy. And even for the wings, where I did add quite a bit of that titanium white in there, it's just not good. It's just not good at all. But I don't want to slate this too much, because I appreciate maybe some of you guys have these paints and maybe you've used them and you've thought gouache is a bit of a struggle, or you perhaps just haven't encountered any of the problems I have. However, if you have encountered those problems, I think maybe a good suggestion would be to at least buy a decent white gouache. I'm pretty sure you can get open stock for the Winsor & Newton gouache. I'm pretty sure I've bought singular tubes before from little independent art shops, so maybe that might help, especially with those opacity issues. As for the consistency, I'm not really sure what I can offer for advice there. You're going to either lose your opacity in favour for an easier to paint with experience, or you're going to make it difficult for yourself just so you've got those vibrant colours. And I think maybe if you've got these paints and you're wondering what to do with them, I would just keep practicing and remember there are better, cheaper paints out there for next time. When it came to doing the outlining for the dragon, and I felt like I did actually need quite a dark one, so I used that same blue that I'd mixed up in the background to just add all those lines in there. But I found that so hard. I had to dip into that so many times with the paintbrush, and for me, especially when I'm using detailing brushes, whether it be a rigger brush or a finer brush like I'm using now, the last thing I want to be doing is having to break that line I'm drawing just so I can dip it back in the paint and then carry on with it, because it just creates an opportunity for inconsistent and uneven lines. Me personally, when I'm doing line work, I want to try and get it done with confident, bold strokes, and that does take a lot of practice. But this paint was that bad for doing the details and the line work, I was like doubting myself. I'm thinking, have I been that bad with the flu? It's like affected my ability to do line work. It made me doubt myself at times, this paint did. But let's try and keep it positive. So I'll give you the pros first. You've got a nice selection of colours. You've got a good 12 colours to work at. They're not too dissimilar from the Holbein ones, so you've got those, I guess. Some of the colours are okay, so the black is pretty good, and I guess the red tones might have been okay. I obviously didn't use them in this painting, but from just swirling around on the page, they didn't seem quite as terrible to work with. The colours that you tend to find that aren't quite as opaque and gouaches, like the blues and greens, yeah, I just try and avoid using them if you can, or just be patient with yourself. The cons are difficult to mix, could have better pigments in there, less binder and whatever they fill these paints with. And that titanium white, no, it's not white at all, it's grey. It's a really dirty, horrible colour, and that's not great for mixing with or adding those highlights. As you can see, the scales on the dragon, they're not that shiny, and I'm kind of used to having a nice, shiny, sparkly dragon, and it was just quite lacklustre, so definitely get a better white paint if you have these. But anyway, enough waffling and rambling on about that. I'm not too hateful towards the final product, it just makes me want to do a better job, so I might have to revisit this dragon in a future video. Anyway, I do hope you found this video helpful and you've enjoyed it. Again, I'm sorry I couldn't put anything more festive up. Let's hope next year I don't get a series of cold and flu and goodness knows what else. I want to wish you a happy Christmas and happy holidays and season's greetings and all that good stuff. And of course, thank you as always for watching. I'll see you lovely lot soon. Bye!